Friends and family of former Prime Minister John Howard have turned out in Sydney this afternoon at the official launch of his autobiography. Mr Howard was joined by his wife and their children at the Intercontinental Hotel. Former politicians, including Wilson Taki, Alexander Downer, were there as well, along with our very good mate, singer Kamal. Well, but we're told most of the talk centred on Mr Howard's appearance last night on the ABC Current Affairs program Q&A, when a member of the audience threw his shoes at the former Prime Minister. That protester is Peter Gray, and Muzz and I caught up with Peter Gray a little bit earlier this afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Clearly you went there last night to the Q&A set with the intention of hurling your shoes at the former Prime Minister. Is that fair to say?
No, I wouldn't really say that's fair to say. Look, I went there with kind of quite determined to confront John Howard about the war in Iraq. The thought had crossed my mind years ago that, as it probably came to many people, they wanted to throw shoes at John Howard when they saw that Iraqi journalist throw the shoes at George W. Bush, because there are plenty of people through this country who opposed the war in Iraq quite strongly. But really, I was motivated by John Howard's ridiculous attempt at an answer to the question that I put to him.
Now listen, did you get your shoe back? Because they weren't cheapies, they were Doc Martens.
They weren't Doc Martens, they were Dunlop Volleys, but no, I didn't get the...
Oh, Dunlops.
Dunlop Volleys, that's the shoe of choice. I mean, it used to be Muscles Rosewell. He was playing at Wimbledon, the Dunlop Volleys.
I didn't want to hurt the man.
Well, that's right, but you wanted to make a point.
That's right.
Did you ask for the shoes back, by the way? There's been some debate about that today.
There has been some debate about that. Look, I asked the staffer on the way out if I could have my shoes back. I didn't go back to the studios to the desk and ask for my shoes back. I think it's all immaterial. I'd much rather discuss the war in Iraq and John Howard's culpability. I think that's a pretty minor detail, to be honest.
Was it left with that? I mean, when you left, was there any talk about, assault or anything like that of a former Prime Minister, or did they just escort you from the building?
They escorted me from the building. They took all my details. They took my driver's license for some time. If they wish to charge me with assault, that's certainly up to them. And I'm happy to answer in court to what they have on me.
Has there been any suggestion that it might end up in court, Peter?
Plenty of people have suggested it. I think there's probably, quite a number of people out there who'd love to see me in court, and that's a fair enough opinion. There's plenty of people out there who'd love to see John Howard in court.
Is that something you would welcome? I mean, given your statements, I think I've heard and read earlier today that you're very happy that, in fact, your protest has gone around the world now.
I didn't know that it had gone around the world. I certainly hope that it goes particularly around the Middle East and to all the places where people have really suffered the damage that John Howard wrought.
Obviously, you believe that our troops should be coming home. Why do you have that line of thinking?
I think 60,000 civilians are the ones that the Americans have admitted have died from the violence just in Iraq. I think that's a very good reason in itself to bring troops home. I think that's a simple enough statement in itself.
The reason I ask you that is because Muzz and I had a caller to the program last week, because as you know, this topic has been debated for quite some time about whether or not our troops should stay in Afghanistan. And this woman said to us, if you guys leave, what will happen to all the women over there that are currently suffering under that particular rule? They'll be left to be bashed, raped, killed,
denied access to education, and so on.
And that was an interesting argument because we've never thought about it that way.
Look, I think that Afghanistan is a mess at the moment. Iraq is a mess at the moment, and that's our responsibility. Now, I think one of the problems that aggravates the situation in Iraq is the impression of occupation by Western powers. I think the best thing that we could do for Afghanistan and Iraq is offer a great deal of foreign aid and see that it's spent correctly and not given to corrupt governments like the Karzai government that's been set up by the US.
Well, the Karzai government this morning, I've heard President Karzai himself admitting, yes, we've taken millions of dollars from Iran, from the Iranian president's office.
Yes, I'm sure he has. I'm sure he takes his money wherever he can get it. I don't really know why the US will put him in power there.
Tell me this, there was a young woman with you last night. Were you together, clearly?
She's my fiancée.
Okay, and you've thrown the shoes. And what have you actually said? Because it's off camera. It's off mic. I thought I heard something about this is for the dead in Iraq.
I said, this is for the Iraqi dead and this is for the Iraqi living. And that's exactly why I threw the shoes. I threw it for the hundreds of thousands who've died as directly and indirectly as a result of our war in Iraq, and for those that are still living with the consequences of our military intervention there.
Do you have some sort of personal tie with the Middle East?
I'm a citizen of the world. That's the closest I'll go.
No, because I'm just detecting an accent.
No, I was brought up in Newcastle. I've lived here all my life.
One final one. You mentioned Newcastle. I'm sure I read this morning too that you were fingered, rightly or wrongly. You can let me know if this is true. That did you in some way damage the car of the then Premier Morris Yema in a protest up in Newcastle a year or three ago now?
Look, I'd rather talk about the war in Iraq, but I'm certainly happy to say that he thinks I damaged his car. I don't think I damaged his car.
And Peter, if it ends up in court, you're happy? Bring it on. To say I'm happy to go to court. I'm happy to answer for what I've done. I am happy to do that. I mean, nobody wants to be dragged before a court. I'm sure John Howard doesn't want to be dragged before a court. However, some things must happen, and whatever the court decides, if I am dragged to court, I'm happy to abide by that.
Now, did you get an ear bashing from the fiancé?
She supported everything, and yeah, I thank her for that.
Well, I think she was yelling out, "You've got blood on your hands, Mr. Howard," as you both left the studio.
There was actually a number of people in the audience saying supportive things. They were kind of drowned out by the rest of the audience. But
I wasn't aware of that. Watching the program, Peter Gray, I wasn't aware there was much support for your actions in the studio. So you're telling me that there was, in fact, some support for you?
No, I said there was a couple of voices. There was a lot of voices going, and certainly the majority were not supportive, and that's exactly what we could expect. But look, I think if you canvassed all of Australia today, you would find polarised opinions, and you would find hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions who agree with me, millions who want to see me in jail. That's fair enough. I think you'd also find millions who'd love to see John Howard in court, in the International Criminal Court, answering charges of war crimes.
Can I ask, they're pretty strong words. I'm just wondering, John Howard initiated all of this. Should you not be directing some of your venom towards the current politicians and Julia Gillard? They're in the position now to pull our troops out. John Howard's not.
Certainly. I would love to say to Julia Gillard, directly. I'd love to meet with her and put a case for bringing the troops out of Iraq. But
you might have to go barefoot if you're going to meet Julia Gillard.
That's right. But look, John Howard, he took us there single-handedly. He didn't take it to the Parliament. He didn't take it to the people. The majority of Australians were opposed to the war in Iraq. He single-handedly took us there. He single-handedly took us to Afghanistan. He needs to be held accountable for those actions. There are hundreds of thousands of people dead. There are hundreds of thousands of people who will be living with the legacy of that war for their entire lives. Mm-hmm. He should be held accountable. And when I say war crimes, you say it strong language. Going to war is even stronger than strong language, I might suggest. He is responsible for those deaths in Iraq.
Peter Gray, thanks so much for your time, and thanks last night for livening up a very, very entertaining Q&A. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Peter Gray, protester who was on the set last night. I love that program. I do watch it every single week.
Yeah, you do watch it.
And last night was one out of the box. And full marks to John Howard for having the ticket to go up there on his own. Because normally it's a panel, as you know, it's a panel format. There was John Howard up the front with Tony Jones, the ABC host and moderator, and an audience that was pretty split down the middle, as Peter said. His protest, there was a degree of support, but not too much. But the audience itself, I think it's fair to say last night, was probably half and half pro-John Howard and anti-John Howard, and both sides got a fair ventilation of their views. Very good show.
It'll be interesting if you saw it last night, wondering what you thought about it, even if you didn't see it. I mean, what do you think about Peter Gray's actions, throwing that shoe at the former Prime Minister?
Enough.
Well, look, I can understand his anger, but seriously, I mean, John Howard can't do anything about it now, and to say that John Howard's got to be put before a court for war crimes is just bloody ridiculous, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he should be venting his anger at Julia Gillard. She's in the position now to be able to pull our troops out.
Yeah, but John Howard was the one who took us into that war in Iraq against all the advice. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
Okay,
I mean, please, the UN didn't find any. There were none to be found. And we've just slavishly followed the White House into war at what cost? At what cost?
But the Labor government's been in a position for quite some time, haven't they?
3 years.
Right, to actually pull them out. They've done nothing about it.